So, it's interesting. Around the time I was starting Stranger Things at first, when I watched like the first two episodes, um, that was like back in January, and around that time I had just gotten off of watching another Netflix series of unfortunate events, and I'm gonna say it right now. I don't like the show. At least the first season, at least. And I should probably go into detail in the backstory. I have read the series of unfortunate events books. Really dark, but they're still enjoyable to read. And when the movie was when the film was when they were trying to get a film series going at the time, I remember Barry Sonnenfeld, who did the Men in Black and Addams Family movies and Nine Lives. He actually was originally planned to direct that film, but scheduling conflicts, so he ended up just being a producer on that. And the Jim Carrey film happened, and then there was going to be word of a sequel. Some saying it was actually going to end up being stop motion, which would have been really weird, but I would have loved that. But no, that faltered through, and so reboot. In television format, it was probably a better decision to go with, to make it more of a television-based series. And with Netflix, it's like that's ripe for the taking. And Barry Sonnenfeld returned and was 100% on board with it, even directing the few of the episodes. So, yeah, I should probably go into why I don't like the show. I remember getting halfway through at one point and saying I'm not really into it, and it's basically the same. What it is since I was fresh off an editing class, I noticed that a lot of the editing in this film is really weird. Like, a prime example of it is when you're introduced to Justice Strauss, who in this film is played by actually in this show is played by Joan Cusack, whereas in the film she was played by Catherine O'Hara, who appears in the series, by the way. But yeah, when they meet up with Justice Strauss, it's a really, the editing and direction of how that happens is like really weird, because it starts off with them, because it shows them in one scene being driven over to the neighborhood, and then it's like it cuts to all of them, like the Baudelaire orphans, Mr. Poe, and Justice Strauss holding groceries already at her driveway, and I'm like, what the hell? It's just a weird sudden turn that just really took me off guard, and there was a lot of moments like that. The color scheme is a little bit not easy to. It's unpleasant to look at, and I'm not saying that in a good way. But it's the kind of unpleasant look that the Emoji Movie had, because the Emoji Movie just had a really dull looking color scheme, even though there's like bright colors everywhere. It just didn't look appealing. And with this show, and not to that level that the Emoji Movie's at, but you get where I'm coming from. It feels like it doesn't really feel. That's the thing. It doesn't feel like like you're actually in a neighborhood or in this fantasy world. It feels like you're on a set. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's the intention to go by, because, I mean, they did release a trailer where it's like, it shows Patrick Warburton as Lemony Snicket walking through the set of, like, I believe it was the Wide Window, but I don't remember. I'll have to double check. But yeah, it's like, I get it, it's on a set, but the way it looks does not. It just doesn't work. Like the only time I actually felt like they were actually right there in the moment was, or like they're in that particular area was, I believe the reptile. By the time it gets to the reptile room, that's when you actually feel like you're in that location as opposed to on a set constantly. Um, and there were a lot of moments where it's like I know I don't want to compare this to the movie, but you know there are certain lines of dialogue that are said in the show that point out the obvious, and there's a lot of repetition of that because it's then repeated later on, and I'm like, okay, we get it. It's based on a book. Don't have to recite lines from the book because they were like, it's like if you're watching someone, you need visual cues can tell more things. Like a prime example of it is the scene when they find in the wide window segment when they find Aunt Josephine and they're riding in the boat. You don't, and the leeches are about to come and attack. They say they haven't eaten anything, and in the movie it's vastly different because it just has that one shot of Aunt Josephine hiding the banana peel and then tossing it over, and their reaction is like, "Why? What? Aunt Josephine, what?" And it just goes from there. Whereas in the show, it like I know it's a show, they need to add in a little bit of padding, but you don't have to make every episode an hour long. Like 30 or 35 minutes is fine. But yeah, they drag it out. They drag that moment out for so long, and it just and they even show the I don't know. There are a lot of things about it that just bug the hell out of me. And some of the performances are just kind of they just feel inferior to the movie. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the cast they have for the show, but for me, I just felt like the movie just had a better execution of both how they should act. Like, yeah, Alfred Woodward just seems so over the top, and it just really feels out of place. I just didn't really buy into that compared to Meryl Streep's. I mean, then again, it is Meryl Streep's. It's kind of hard to go against. I will say this: I liked what's his name, Asif Mamfi. He was the guy from The Daily Show who used to work when Jon Stewart was on. I thought he was a good Uncle Monty. I liked him. Although, yeah, I'd say I would put Asif Mambi's Uncle Monty on par with Billy Connolly's. Because they do have that, like, they do share that characteristic of a very caring nature for the Baudelaires. In very similar manners. And I like how he's the only one that isn't a complete idiot. As opposed to essentially every other adult in this movie. Or in this show. Like, I know that was the tone of the books, like, adults don't really believe children all that much, but this one takes it to another step. The worst of it all is Mr. Poe, who... I don't remember the actor's name, but I'm sorry. This guy bugged the hell out of me. Like, Mr. Poe was a bit naive, but he wasn't this arrogantly stupid. And I'm like, oh my god, we get it. God. Although I think the worst of it all is probably Neil Patrick Harris and as Count Olaf. And of course, there's his crew of cronies. And yeah, I'm gonna say it right now. Uh, don't get me wrong, I love Neil Patrick Harris and all, but he's not intimidating as Count Olaf. Like, I know that's not the intention. Like, like he's supposed to be this overconfident, over egotistical, sniveling thief, but I'm sorry. I know a lot of people rag on Jim Carrey's Count Olaf, but at least he handled he at least handled a better sense of intimidation better than Harris did. And God, this is a detail that also bugged me the most about this is personally just a detail from the book that they changed for the show, is that instead of just using, like one henchman at a time, to keep suspicion down, they decide to have everybody come out at once, like especially in the wide window and the reptile room. Like, the only time he actually had only one crony helping him was with the miserable mill, and that just got annoying fast, because when all of them are together, I just cannot stand them. They just get so annoying. And that running gag of Count Olaf breaking the fourth wall of saying it's like, oh, I usually it's like, instead of like movies or television, it's like, oh no, I prefer streaming services. Or some joke is like, haven't you learned anything this week, year, season? I'm like, we get it. It's a Netflix show. Knock it off. It wasn't funny the first time. Yeah. And Catherine O'Hara, if you want to know who she plays, she basically plays the... if you've read The Miserable Mill, you know there's a doctor who's messing with Klaus's mind constantly. That's who Catherine O'Hara is playing, and then she's later gone by the end of it all. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like, this is a show I want to like, but almost at every point there's another reason for me to just say no. But I am gonna give it one more chance. This is kind of the same treatment I had for The Walking Dead, because I got through season 1, and then I got a little bit through season 2, and after that I just stopped. This is the same situation for A Series of Unfortunate Events. If it doesn't have something that impresses me by the time I'm done watching, sorry. If it doesn't have enough to invest me by the time of the Austere Academy, which is the startup story for season 2 and is also the 5th book, if it doesn't have anything by then, I'm gonna stop. That's gonna be like when I say I'm done with this. And it's kind of sad that I have to come to that conclusion. Yeah. I guess I probably should have listened to the theme song a little bit more closely, because then I would have realized, oh, this is what you were warning me about. So yeah, there's that. That's A Series of Unfortunate Events, or, as I like to call it, a series of disappointment. Yeah. There's that.